I believe so strongly in the open door and to give people second chances, and I know I've had a second chance more than once.
Students come in, hands shaking, ready to flee, and the change in their persona and their attitude really is inspiring.
Just think of the number of students around the country who have their access to higher education through the community college. I think it's one of the great movements.
Green River is turning 50 years old now, and what amazes me is the extent to which education has changed.
Higher education in America really was only for relatively few. The end of World War II brought advancement, and the war babies were just beginning to grow old enough to be in high school and facing college education, and all of the colleges and universities were expanding very rapidly.
When the Community College Act was passed in 1967, it created the community college system. Up until that time, we had junior colleges that were essentially the first 2 years of academic transfer. We were fortunate to get in on the ground floor, and that's the way Green River was built, around a comprehensive college.
Mel Lindblom was hired by Hayes Holman. Hayes, who is known as the father of Green River, superintendent of the Auburn School District at the time.
My father was the first person in his family to get a college education. But in order to do that, he had to go quite a distance away in this little rural cotton farming community that he was raised in. And he tells the story of one night he was sitting in his boarding house with other students, and they were dreaming, if they had all the money in the world, what type of college would they build? And one said, I'd build a college for the arts, another a college of mathematics and science. And my dad says, well, I think I'd build a college a little closer to home.
When I became governor, there was a law that said you cannot have community colleges in any county that has a four-year institution. And that we changed fairly quickly because it was obvious that the need was there and you couldn't deny that need.
Hayes Holman was an environmentalist. When he developed this campus, he visualized a plethora of different varieties of plants.
When Hayes first took me out there, he said, this is where we want to build the college. And I thought, oh brother, we got a long way to go.
My father was just fascinated by trees, those wonderful things. And so when they hired Bud Ailey to be the first architect of the Green River buildings, he insisted that they save as many trees as possible.
Matter of fact, Dan Evans, who later was governor, was our head of the survey deal. Evans and Associates did the surveying. And so I went out and walked the campus quite a bit as they laid out the buildings. And several buildings got moved because of big trees.
We began to think very early about, okay, if we're going to build these facilities, how should we build them? How can we make them the most efficient? How can we make them so they really serve the audience they're to serve? And how do we make them so they really fit the landscape in which they're located?
Because there's just a forest out there. Matter of fact, when I first came, there were no roads there. 124th ended in a big sawdust pile at the end of the road.
If you realize Green River's history, they had a dream. The architect was going to make that place on the east side of campus, that big open place there. It was going to be a drain field, a septic tank drain field for this little campus. But someone said, you can't, that's a dream, you can't do that.
We had to get water and sewer up on the campus, and we had to get the city of Auburn to do it.
I think at first there was a question, what is this they're building up there with my tax money? But I think it evolved pretty quickly. I think we started really getting involved with the community.
The board designated me as the first president of Green River in 1964.
Mel was like a pioneer president, and he understood what it took to run the college.
Of all the people that I've known that really helped me, it's Mel. He was my hero, and he was extremely honest, and I think his honesty tried to stay with me most of my life.
I knew Mel, of course, very well, and he was an early enthusiast. There wasn't anything that couldn't be done. A lot of changes had to occur and a lot of invention of new ways of doing things, and he was up to every one of those.
We were all anticipating what's going to happen, what's going to happen with this new venture, and it was just really exciting. And I think my opening comment to the faculty was, now what do we do?
I first visited Green River in the summer of 1965. My first impression were all the beautiful fir trees.
My first day was interviewing for a job. It had been raining and there were no sidewalks. You walked planks from one building to another.
Green River was only 2 years old when I came here, and there were less than 2,000 kids. There were more trees here than there were students. I thought that was pretty cool.
If I were to describe the campus in those days, the accent color, International Harvester Orange with the dark brown stain. And that was part of the design specification. It was all over the place.
Actually, there weren't very many buildings. The Holman Library was where the business office was. There were teaching places in the Holman Library.
Plus it was the bookstore. Plus it was the cafeteria. Plus it was where the kids hung out.
It was a library, it was the administration building, it was the center of all activity on campus at that time. You saw everybody.
Right away, the new students said we have to have a mascot. And so we had an election. They had alligator or impala. And so the gator won.
I thought that was a bit odd for our part of the country, but that's what they wanted. So that's how the mascot came about.
It made a pretty good sized news deal in the Auburn paper, and someone called me and said, we have a gator we'd like to give you as a mascot. And so I didn't know any difference. I said, sure, let's take a look at it. And so she brought a gator up about this big, and we had no idea what to do with it.
Right next to the ST complex, there was a little greenhouse. And in the greenhouse, surrounded by shrubs, they housed an alligator, a real live alligator. And the alligator would make an appearance at most of the home basketball games.
I do remember the ASB officers parading the gator around the commons when I was a student here. He was just a little guy. They called him Gruck, I think, for GRCC.
As things started progressing, a lot of schools started going away from live mascots at that time, and Green River was one of them, and we got rid of the gator.
When I came to the college, I came to appreciate the power of education as I learned about what the faculty were doing, what the staff was doing to welcome the community college students here.
I was just amazed at how friendly all of the faculty were. Dr. Adams was being called Nigel. Dr. Papritz was being called Rawhide. Even Dr. Lindblom was being called Mel, though we didn't say that to his face. It was, hello, Dr. Lindblom.
We were very fortunate to get a number of people who had already had a reputation for what they knew.
Everyone was willing to help you and guide you, and they wanted you to be here. It was just evident from the first time I've ever stepped on this campus.
When I came here, it was faculty doing the advising, and they had faculty counselors who did advising.
I can remember the academic advising days in Lindblom Center where every faculty member sat at his or her table and all the advisees would come in and talk, and that was what Green River was all about. And I was glad to be a staff member throughout all that too.
That was one of the most important things I think we did, was the close association with students and student advising.
It's experiences like that that inspire you, and so that you know that what you have done is maybe a little bit right.
Probably during my 40 years in community college, working with the faculty was some of the most interesting times I had.
The big event on campus, obviously, was the Vietnam War.
Certainly there was a threat to students of that age of being drafted. That was the big fear, and during a certain time of the 60s, so in the early 60s when Green River started, you could have a student deferment.
Congress, whoever decided selective service, if you were going to college and taking 15 credits, you can stay in school. And so it was just the time that we opened.
I served in World War II. I served on a destroyer out in the Pacific, so I knew what war was. I was an advocate for the students in that regard in terms of being anti-Vietnam War.
A lot of vets coming back, there was still a lot of anger about that, a lot of resentment.
And I can still remember in '67, my high school girlfriend's brother coming home in a box. And it was very traumatic for all of us.
A mother came in from Kent, and she brought her son's $10,000 life insurance and donated that to the scholarship fund, such as it was at that time. Very touching moment.
So many of us, our college experience is beyond the classroom. A lot of it's just in the interactions, and that builds the strength of this institution. It's in our diversity, in all dimensions of that word, that this becomes such a strong institution.
The fact that the college is still here and that it's grown so much and it evolved so much, and I think that's what we should celebrate.
So many things have changed, but that all has happened because of the dedicated people.
The most important resource we have here are the people.
You have to continue to understand your changing community, and that's what will make community colleges and Green River particularly just as successful in the next 50 years as they have been in the last 50.
When I came, I thought that I would teach 30 years and then retire. I think I ended up 40-some years.
The focus on student success is there for everyone, whether it's the faculty, the staff, the administrators.
When it comes to focus, or primary focus, it's about the student.
The highlight of my whole career were the 24 years I taught at Green River.
I'm very proud of the college.
If I were to sum it up in one word, it's the fact that we are a community.